Hey, welcome back. Today I've got kind of a unique truck I want to talk about. This is a 1927 Model TT 1-ton truck, and it's got kind of a unique history and some nice features. I'm going to kind of walk around and show them to you. First of all, though, some of you may be confused because I just used the term TT. The Model T guys are familiar with this, but not everybody is. By now you should be familiar with the Ford Model T. It was made from 1908 up to 1927. And since the very beginning, people started to buy Model Ts and Model T chassis, because Ford would sell just chassis for aftermarket purposes, and put all kinds of different bodies on them, including delivery vans and trucks and things. This is all on the Model T car chassis. Ford saw an opportunity, and in 1917, he introduced the Model TT. This is basically a Ford Model T, only it has a much longer, more heavy-duty frame, a heavy-duty rear end, and beefed-up rear suspension. That way, we've got actually an honest-to-goodness Ford truck. This is the first time that that's happened. This isn't just a pickup truck built on a car chassis. This is an actual purpose-built truck. Now, you could get Ford-built cabs and Ford-built beds for these things in various configurations. Ford had a steel C cab and a steel closed cab. He had express beds and he had flat beds. Various different things that you could buy straight from the factory. About half of the trucks that he sold, though, were just the bare chassis, so that you could build or buy any other sort of a body to put on it. And these things were used for anything from dump trucks to delivery vans to school buses. They're everywhere. After the Model T ceased production in 1927, we transitioned into an entirely new car for Ford. In fact, he started right back at the beginning of the alphabet again, called it the Model A because this was such a new car. He kept its same sort of nomenclature. Then the heavy-duty trucks based on the Model A were called the AA. So we had the Model T, the TT, and the A, and the AA. So that's the nomenclature that Ford followed up into the V8 era. This is a 1927 Ford Model TT ton truck, pickup truck. The chassis, this part right here, is all made by Ford. The cab, this part here, is made by the Bryan Cabinet Company in Bryan, Ohio. The bed, everything back here, is all homemade. Let me give you a little bit of history of this particular truck. This particular truck is closing in on 95 years old now. But would you believe that I'm only the second owner in those 95 years? The story of how I got to this one is I was at an auction. Actually, a lot of my stories start off with that. Anyway, I was at an auction down in Ohio. And this was the original family that was selling off all the old farmstead. It was a big farm auction. And this truck was purchased in 1927. And then it was used as a regular farm truck all the way up until 1951. In 1951, they bought a brand new Ford F1 to replace it. Also a very nice truck, but I can't buy everything. Anyway, they had taken the grain bed off of this one and moved it over onto the F1 because the bed just, unbolted there and bolted on over there. Farmers are thrifty after all. I'll get back to some extra thriftiness over here in just a bit. Anyway, the F1 sold, and then this thing came up, and I really wasn't considering buying it, but I was standing around watching it go, and it seemed like it was going fairly inexpensively, and I think I paid $1,600 for it, which I thought was very, very low price at the time, and I thought, well, I'll buy it and I'll flip it, I'll resell it. And I got it home and I started to play with it, and I kind of fell in love with it. So I just kept it after that. Let me take you on a little more detailed tour of this thing and show you some of the nice features on it. I said this was based on a Model T, and up front here it's indistinguishable from a Model T car. We're using the same hood, fenders, headlights, radiator, and power plant. Everything is the same as on a car. By the way, that is 22 neck-snapping horsepower that we're using to move this thing around. This is mostly made for torque, not speed. A Model T normally, if it's tuned well, 35 miles per hour is a good cruising speed. A TT with a standard rear end, that's a slower speed rear end, cruises comfortably at about 25 miles an hour, unless you happen to have high speed gears in the back, and then you can get up to 35 to kind of keep up with the cars. Speed wasn't really an issue around the farm back in the day. Under the hood here is a standard Ford Model T power plant for 1926 and 27. What you notice right away if you're into Model Ts is this has the upgraded carburetor on there. In 1926, they did away with the standard carburetor they'd been using for years and years and went with an updraft vaporizer carburetor on there. Some people have trouble with these, but I rebuilt this one and it hasn't given me a lick of trouble. It started right up every time. Something that Model T guy might notice is there's something missing right there. That's that farm thriftiness I was talking about. What goes there is a generator, but all I have is a block-off plate because whoever bought this truck originally did not spend the extra couple of bucks for a self-starter. Over on the other side where the starter goes, there's another block-off plate. Ford introduced a self-starter in 1919, and as you might think, it proved to be a popular option. Very few cars going forward then would not have that option. My truck is the exception. Never fear, I've got a perfectly good hand crank right here. When you don't buy the starter option, there's a number of subtle differences all around the car. For instance, this horn right here is different. That's a magneto horn rather than a battery-powered horn. There's no battery because there's no starter, so there's nothing for the battery to really do. The engine runs just off of magneto. You don't have an electric taillight anymore. You have a kerosene-powered taillight, which is old-timey by this point. The headlights are still electric, but they run strictly off of magneto. One of the interesting features of running your headlights off of magneto rather than battery is that the power that's generated by the magneto varies as the RPM of the engine varies. So as you're driving faster, your headlights get brighter, and as you pull to a stop, your headlights get a little dimmer. It's interesting to see a Model T that operates like this drive at night. Moving back to the cab, that, as I mentioned before, this is made by Bryan Cabinet Company in Bryan, Ohio. The original owners would have purchased just the chassis from Ford and then gone to the Bryan Cabinet Company and had them supply this purpose-built truck cab. The doors slide back rather than hinge open. Inside, the cab is very Spartan and workmanlike. There's actually a seat cushion that normally goes here, but I have it out. I'm full 6 feet tall and, well, larger frame, and Model Ts in general are built for someone just a little bit smaller than me. So by taking the seat cushion out, I sit down a little bit more, and it's a more comfortable driving position for me. This is interesting up here. This is a 1926-27 style instrument panel. Normally, there is an amp meter right here, but because I did not buy a starter, I have one where this is just blocked off and there's nothing there. Down below that we have the ignition coils, one for each cylinder. Over here we have a carburetor adjustment, so I can adjust the carburetor mixture on the fly as I'm driving down the road if I so choose. These holes up here are, this was for the choke rod, but because I don't have a starter, there's no reason for me to choke it when I'm sitting up in the cab, so I don't get that rod. Down here on the floor, we are 3 pedals across, but they are not what you think. This one over here is your brake, all the way over on the right. That one over there, that's how you shift gears. If I push all the way down, I am in low speed. Let up completely with my foot, and I'm in high speed. If I push it down about halfway, I'm in neutral. Hopefully. This one in the middle, that actually puts me into reverse when I push down on that. So you have your clutch, reverse, and brake. So it's completely different than a modern car. You might ask me where my accelerator is. Well, that's up here. Right there is where I can give it more gas. Over on the other side is where I can adjust the engine timing on the fly. So normally as I'm driving faster, give it a little bit more gas. I also want to advance the timing. So as I'm driving, I'm adjusting both of these levers down to go faster, or both of them up if I want to slow down. Over here we have a parking brake, which is notoriously weak. On Model Ts, if you have the parking brake set, that will generally hold the car in place as long as it doesn't get any kind of inclination to move. Here in the middle, I actually have something that's not a Model T part. This is an accessory Muncie transmission. This is a 4-speed, 3 forward, 1 reverse speed. This is an accessory that's on the back of the Model T engine. Actually one of the speeds is an overdrive, so I can get up to 35 miles an hour with this truck. The top half of the windshield rotates out and locks in place. That way as you're driving you get a little breeze coming in on you. That's actually kind of a must when you're driving in the summertime to get that breeze flowing through the truck. Generally I will drive with both of the sliding doors open so I can get the maximum amount of breeze through here. Something you notice right away is this weird block of wood right in the middle of the windshield. Well, that's more farm thriftiness for you. What we've got here is the glass is broken. However, heaven forbid we should go and get a new piece of glass when it's just broken right there in the middle. So let's get a couple of pieces of plywood and some screws and just patch that glass right back up, good as new. Normally, technically I should change this out for safety glass, but that would get rid of this neat story I have. And I don't really drive the truck that much, so I'm just gonna kind of take my chances. Don't do this at home, kids. Up at the top, we have the manufacturer's nameplate, Bryan Specialty Cabinet Company in Bryan, Ohio. If you're ever at Souder Village in Archibald, in one of the stores there in the new 1920s street, they have a whole bunch of display cases in the store. And I noticed this same tag, the Bryan Cabinet Company, on those display cases. So I got a little excited when I saw that. I'm not sure how they felt about me wigging out over the display cases rather than what's in them, but you know, that's me. Next to it, we have the remains of the 1953 registration, still thumbtacked up there. That was the last time that this thing was actually registered for the road. Up top here, you might notice that I have replaced the top material. That was that's a cotton with a leatherette over top of it. The original top material was just too far gone to be saved. This is an all original truck, and I'm trying to maintain it as original as I can within reason, but sometimes components are just too far gone and they need to be replaced. So let me pause just a second and tell you a funny driving story with this truck. A couple of years back, the truck had sat over the winter. I don't drive it really in the winter. First car show in the spring. I get everything out, get it going, and I start driving down the road. All of a sudden, unbeknownst to me, over the winter, a whole bunch of hornets had actually made their home inside the cab. And I got about a mile down the road before the hornets decided, well, that's about enough of that. So they started just pouring out of I don't even know where. I'm driving alone, so they're just swarming around inside the cab, just where I'm sitting right now. My first impulse is to stop and get out of there. However, I'm driving with the doors open. So I start noticing that as I'm driving, the hornets are going out the doors and away. So I think the only way I'm going to get rid of these hornets, instead of stopping, is actually to speed up. So I actually start to pull these levers down and speed up, give me maximum velocity to try and get rid of the hornets as fast as possible. All the time, they're swarming around in here. I'm screaming because I'm getting stung. I finally get to the car show, pull to a stop. By that time, most all the hornets are gone. Stop and pause for just a moment. Maybe let one manly tear shed, and then go back about my business. My life is just one misadventure after another, I tell you. Oh, by the way, as a little added to that story, I didn't even notice it until I started watching myself on the video. This little swelling right here, stung by a bee just before I started filming. Like I said, one misadventure after another. Now you may remember that the original family had taken the grain bed off of the back of this truck and put it on the new F1 when they purchased that. So when I bought this truck, it had no bed on the back of it whatsoever. Actually, I took a careful look at that grain bed and it wasn't really any great loss. So anyway, I didn't have any bed on it, which just looked kind of weird, but I wanted something that sort of blended in with the truck. I didn't want to build something new. So I was kind of mulling that over for a while. And then I was at an auction. There's that line again. Anyway, I was at an auction and there's an old busted up trailer for sale. And I think I bought it for $4. And this is the bed off of that trailer that I've kind of made a couple of little modifications to. And actually, I think it works pretty well. The support beams that are under there, which are actually the correct length for a flatbed. I took some measurements on there. But where I got the beams is I had an extra barn beam left over from when I built my pole barn. So I just ripped it down the middle and made the support beams out of that. They are treated lumber if you look carefully, so it doesn't blend in exactly right. But I thought ripping an old barn beam that was left over is really kind of in the spirit of the truck. So here's another interesting story about this car. The first time that I actually drove it. When I bought it, as I said before, this had been sitting since 1951 or 52 when they started using that new F1. I think it had 1952 license plates still on it. So this thing had been sitting for, 50, 60 years. This was maybe about 2005 or so. And when I got it, I started doing some work on it. The carburetor was all rusted out inside, so I sent away for a rebuild kit and I rebuilt the carburetor. The wiring was all shot, so I replaced the wiring, changed the coils out for some that I had recently tuned up, so I knew that they were good. Changed all the fluids, of course, and new spark plugs. And I think that's about it. I was just sort of slowly working on it because I didn't have any sort of a deadline. But I saw that there was a car show coming up at the local church on Sunday morning. And that was about 8 miles down the road. So I thought, I wonder if I can, wonder if this truck would drive that far. So I called up my dad and I said, hey, that TT I bought? Why don't you come over on Saturday and we'll see if we can get it going. Now he was kind of unaware that I had done all this other preparatory work ahead of time. So he came over and he says, I'm never going to get that started. So we fiddled around with it for really only about 45 minutes of playing with the gas line and a couple of other odds and ends, trying to get the carburetor adjusted just right. And the thing kicked over and fired up and adjusted it up and seemed to be running pretty well. And he says, well, that's pretty good. What are we going to do now? And I said, well, I got a car show tomorrow morning. I'm going to go. He couldn't believe it. He says, this thing has been sitting around for 60 years. You fiddle around with it for a half an hour, and now you want to just drive it to a car show. And I said, yep. Actually, this thing drove the 8 miles just fine, without incident. Ran like a top. It may have been the farthest it's ever driven at once, because this thing was just used around a farm. Took it to the car show, got best in show, and then came back. Sometimes these things that have been sitting around for a long time, they just take a little bit of playing around with and they'll fire right up. Underneath here is the Ford truck rear end. This is very different than a car. First of all, the Model T car is a standard ring and pinion drive that you see even on modern cars today. This is actually a worm drive, which you really don't see except on really heavy-duty equipment. It's also, it's got a worm gear up here that turns the pinion down here. We've got very heavy-duty suspension and heavier-duty wheels on the back. There were actually two different gear ratios that were available. The standard slow speed, like I mentioned, goes about 25 miles an hour stock, but about 10% of the TT trucks that were sold had a higher speed rear end under there where you can get up to about 35 miles an hour. Now that those high-speed gears are coveted by most of the TT guys. Heavier duty tires back here. These are Ward's Riverside Power Grip. Ward's Riverside, where they were made for a lot of years, and those were the Montgomery Ward's store brand. Actually, they have a very good reputation for being very long-lasting tires. Those old Royds Riversides, I've been able to take those things out of a field and pump air into them and drive down the road with them. Those things just never wear out. Are my tires old? Yes, they are. Take a look at that, war tire. This was made during World War II, where most people could not get tires. I'm assuming because the original owners were farmers, that they were able to get an exemption and were able to buy tires when really no one else ever could. I'll probably have to change the tires out at some point, but I really don't drive all that much. They seem to be holding up all right. The rubber is about the consistency of granite at this point, and I really like the military knobby look. So for now, we're just going to keep them. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little tour of my truck today. Next week, I'm going to be at the Red Barn Spectacular, hopefully, in Hickory Corners, Michigan. That's about a 2.5 hour drive for me, so I'll probably be trailering the TT out there. That's a little bit further than I like to drive it. So as long as I don't have any breakdowns with my tow vehicle, I should be there. Put together sort of an interesting video for you, hopefully, and upload it on Sunday. I've never actually been to that show. Everybody says it's really good and I should go, but I just have never gotten around to it. So it'll be a new experience for me too. Supposedly they have about 1,500 cars out there. All cars 25 years or older are welcome. So if you're in the area, stop by or bring your old car. The TT will be around. I might be near it, so stop by and say hey if you happen to see me. Oh, my daughter says I'm supposed to be telling people to like and subscribe, so I don't know, that's down there somewhere. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Also, if you have any questions about Model Ts in general or the truck, feel free to ask questions down there. Sometimes I get a little bit behind just in reading comments because I get so many comments, so just be patient. I'll try and get to you if I can. Anyway, until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye.